Oh, you hear that? That's not laughter. That's panic.
Because somewhere, somehow, the same people who called you crazy just realized they were standing in front of something far more dangerous, calculated,
Precise.
unapologetically genius. You see, they laughed when you moved differently. They whispered when you stayed silent. They pointed when you didn't explain yourself. Something's wrong with them. They've lost it. They're delusional. Delusional.
No.
You were observing. You were building. You were studying the board while they were busy playing checkers on a chess table. And now the same people who mocked your intensity, who feared your silence, who mistook your isolation for weakness, they just realized something terrifying. The madness wasn't chaos. It was strategy. Every late night, every quiet move, every time you let them underestimate you, that wasn't instability. That was positioning. See, the dangerous ones aren't loud. They don't beg for validation. They don't explain their vision to small minds. They let the world misjudge them, because confusion is camouflage. And today the masks are slipping. The laughter is cracking. The smirks are fading, because they finally see it. The crazy they tried to label you with was never insanity. It was vision they couldn't comprehend, patience they couldn't match, courage they couldn't control, and that realization, that's what scares them. So buckle up. Because in this speech, we're not just exposing the truth, we're embracing it. Let's talk about what happens when the world discovers your madness was actually calculated genius. They laughed because your mind didn't move in straight lines. You didn't follow the script, didn't nod on cue, didn't shrink yourself to fit their comfort. And when people cannot predict you, they panic. When they cannot categorize you, they criticize you. It's easier to label someone crazy than to admit you don't have the capacity to understand their depth. So they mock, they joke, they turn your intensity into entertainment, because that feels safer than confronting the possibility that you see something they don't. Mockery is a shield for insecure minds. It's a defense mechanism. When you think differently, speak differently, move differently, you disturb the invisible rules they've built to feel stable. Most people build their identity on repetition and validation. You build yours on vision. That difference alone makes you a threat. Not because you attack them, but because your existence challenges their limits. You're proof that there's another level. And people hate being reminded that they stopped growing. They don't understand your silence, so they assume you're lost. They don't understand your focus, so they call you obsessed. They don't understand your patience, so they think you're passive. But what they fail to see is that you are calculating while they are reacting. You are observing patterns while they are trapped inside them. Every time they laughed, you gathered data. Every time they doubted, you refined your strategy. What looked like isolation was preparation. What looked like madness was mastery in progress. The world is uncomfortable with what it cannot control. And when you refuse to be predictable, you become uncontrollable. That's when the whispers begin. Something's off. They've changed. They're not normal. Of course you're not normal. Normal settles. Normal conforms. Normal stays small to stay accepted. You chose growth over approval. You chose long-term dominance over short-term applause. And that choice confuses people who live moment to moment. Understand this ridicule is often recognition in disguise. They sense something different about you, something they can't articulate. Instead of asking questions, they throw jokes. Instead of seeking clarity, they spread doubt. But beneath the laughter is discomfort. Beneath the sarcasm is comparison. They measure themselves against you and feel the gap widening. So they try to shrink you with words, hoping it will make them feel taller. What they don't realize is that misunderstanding is part of the process for anyone ahead of their time. Visionaries are rarely celebrated at first. They are questioned, challenged, misread. Because new thinking always threatens old comfort. You don't fit their narrative, so they attempt to rewrite you into something digestible. Phrasing is convenient. It requires no deeper analysis. It keeps them from having to evolve. But while they mock, you adapt. While they gossip, you build. While they laugh, you sharpen your edge. You are not distracted by noise because you understand something they don't. Perception is temporary, results are permanent. And when results arrive, mockery turns into silence. The same mouths that joked grow quiet. The same eyes that rolled start watching. Because eventually, what they didn't understand becomes undeniable. Their laughter was never proof of your foolishness. It was proof of their limited vision. And limited vision always laughs before it learns. Silence unsettles people because it gives them nothing to measure. When you don't constantly explain yourself, defend your moves, or broadcast your intentions, they start filling the gaps with their own assumptions. And most assumptions are projections of fear. They think you're unsure. They think you're lost. They think you lack confidence because you're not performing it for them. What they don't understand is that silence isn't emptiness. It's containment. You learn that not every thought deserves an audience. Not every plan needs applause. Not every vision survives exposure. So you stopped announcing. You stopped arguing. You stopped trying to convince people who were committed to misunderstanding you. That wasn't weakness. That was discipline. Because explaining yourself to the wrong people is like handing them blueprints to sabotage your construction. Silence is where strategy lives. It's where observation sharpens. When you're quiet, you see more. You notice who talks too much, who leaks information, who seeks validation, who moves emotionally instead of intelligently. While others rush to be seen and heard, you gather data. You study patterns. You let people reveal themselves through their own noise, and the louder they get, the clearer your advantage becomes. Most people equate power with volume. They believe dominance must be loud, visible, dramatic. But real control is subtle. Real confidence doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't need constant reassurance. It doesn't crumble in the absence of praise. Your silence is proof that you don't depend on external approval to function. And that independence makes you dangerous in ways they can't comprehend. They try to provoke you because your calm unsettles them. They throw comments, subtle insults, passive, aggressive remarks, hoping to trigger a reaction. Because if they can make you react, they regain control. But you don't. You absorb. You assess. You respond only when it serves you. That restraint isn't passivity, it's precision. You understand that energy is currency, and you don't spend it on emotional chaos. Silence also builds mystery, and mystery shifts power. When people don't know your next move, they hesitate. When they can't predict your response, they second-guess themselves. Uncertainty creates tension, and tension creates leverage. While they're busy trying to decode you, you're already 3 steps ahead. They mistake your stillness for stagnation, not realizing you're loading momentum. There's strength in not reacting immediately. There's strength in letting situations unfold before stepping in. Emotional reactions are impulsive. Strategic responses are calculated. You chose calculation. You chose composure. You chose to master your impulses instead of being mastered by them. That level of control takes maturity most people never develop. Silence also protects your focus. The less you talk about your goals, the more energy you have to pursue them. Words feel productive, but action creates results. You stopped confusing expression with execution. You stopped seeking validation for plans that weren't finished. You understood that premature celebration weakens drive. So you moved quietly, letting your results speak in a language no critic could argue with. They thought you were shrinking. In reality, you were refining. They thought you had nothing to say. In reality, you had nothing to prove. And the day your silence translates into undeniable success, the same people who doubted your quietness will call it composure. The same ones who labeled you distant will call you disciplined. Because eventually they realize the truth: silence was never your weakness. It was your weapon. They underestimated you because you let them. That's the part that terrifies them the most. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't ignorance. It was intentional. You saw their assumptions forming, heard the quiet dismissal in their tone, noticed how quickly they reduced you to something small and manageable. And instead of correcting them, you stepped back. You let them believe the illusion. Because underestimation is the perfect disguise. When people think they have you figured out, they relax. They stop watching closely. They stop preparing. They expose their weaknesses because they assume you're not a threat. Overconfidence makes people careless, and carelessness reveals patterns. While they were busy overlooking you, you were studying them, their habits, their triggers, their blind spots. Every time they brushed you aside, they gave you space to grow without pressure. Being underestimated removes expectation. And when there are no expectations, there is freedom. Freedom to experiment. Freedom to fail privately. Freedom to sharpen your skills without public scrutiny. They thought you were behind. They didn't realize you were building momentum where no one could interfere. They saw stillness. They didn't see preparation. Underestimation also exposes character. It shows you who respects people regardless of status and who only values what appears powerful. It reveals who dismisses potential and who recognizes it. When someone underestimates you, they are telling you exactly how limited their vision is. And limited vision always misjudges long-term players. You never rush to prove them wrong. That's what separates you. Most people burn energy trying to correct opinions. You understood something: deeper opinions shift automatically when results become undeniable. There was no need to argue. No need to defend your intelligence. No need to perform strength. Time would do the talking. Results would rewrite the narrative without you saying a word. While they were competing for attention, you were competing with your former self. While they were chasing validation, you were building competence. Underestimation became fuel. Every doubt sharpened your discipline. Every dismissal strengthened your resolve. You didn't internalize their low expectations, you weaponized them. There's a psychological edge in being overlooked. When no one expects much, your growth shocks them. Your progress feels sudden to them, even though it was gradual for you. They call it overnight success. They say, "Where did that come from?" It came from the hours they weren't watching, the days they weren't paying attention, the seasons they assumed you were stagnant. Underestimation also keeps your ego in check. It forces you to focus on substance over image. If no one is applauding you, you either quit or you deepen your craft. You chose depth. You chose mastery over recognition. That's why when the moment finally arrives, you're not scrambling. You're ready. The most powerful move you made was allowing them to feel safe around you. Safe enough to reveal their strategies. Safe enough to underestimate your capacity. Safe enough to believe you weren't evolving. They mistook your patience for weakness, your humility for lack of ambition, your calm for complacency. And by the time they realized the truth, the gap between you and them had already widened. Underestimation is only dangerous if you start believing it. You didn't. You knew who you were becoming, even if they couldn't see it yet. And when reality finally confronts their assumptions, the shock isn't just about your success. It's about realizing they misjudged you completely. They called it chaos because they couldn't see the pattern. From the outside, your moves looked unpredictable. Sudden shifts, unexpected decisions, moments of silence followed by bold action. To them, it felt unstable, random, reckless. But what they mistook for disorder was actually design. You weren't moving without structure. You were moving beyond their ability to decode it. Controlled chaos is uncomfortable to witness because it doesn't follow familiar rhythms. Most people operate in straight lines. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3, predictable progression. You, on the other hand, understood that real leverage comes from disrupting expectations. When your behavior can't be easily mapped, you become difficult to counter, and difficulty creates power. There's a difference between emotional chaos and strategic unpredictability. Emotional chaos is reactive. It's impulsive. It's loud and scattered. Strategic unpredictability is calculated. It's deliberate. It's measured disruption. You don't act to release feelings. You act to shift outcomes. That distinction is everything. One is loss of control. The other is mastery of it. You learn that when people think they've figured out your rhythm, they prepare accordingly. They anticipate your reactions. They build defenses against your usual patterns, so you refuse to become predictable. You broke your own routines before others could exploit them. You changed angles. You shifted tempo. You stayed adaptable. Adaptability is controlled chaos in motion. From their perspective, your evolution felt inconsistent. One day you were quiet. The next you were assertive. One moment detached. The next intensely focused. They couldn't categorize you, and that frustrated them. Humans crave labels because labels create a sense of safety. If they can label you, they can limit you. But you kept expanding beyond every box they tried to place you in. Controlled chaos also requires emotional regulation. You can't strategically disrupt if you're internally unstable. That's what they failed to understand. Behind your unpredictable surface was discipline. Behind your sudden pivots was preparation. You didn't wake up and flip coins to make decisions. You assessed variables. You weighed risks. You calculated timing. The unpredictability was intentional, not accidental. There's power in shifting energy when it's least expected, in stepping back when they expect confrontation, in advancing when they expect hesitation, in staying calm when they expect panic. These reversals destabilize opponents because they rely on pattern recognition. When patterns break, confidence shakes. And when confidence shakes, mistakes multiply. People confuse comfort with control. They feel in control when everything behaves the way they expect. You remove that comfort. Not through aggression, but through evolution. You refuse to stay static. You refuse to be readable. And in a world that thrives on predictability, being unreadable is a weapon. Controlled chaos also keeps you creative. It prevents stagnation. When you allow flexibility in your approach, you open doors others don't even see. You're not trapped by rigid thinking. You're fluid, and fluid forces are harder to contain than solid ones. They adapt to pressure instead of cracking under it. What they saw as instability was actually range. What they labeled as erratic was versatility. What they feared as chaos was command. Because the truth is, real power isn't about rigid order. It's about knowing when to disrupt it. They didn't notice at first. That's how it always happens. The shift is quiet, subtle, almost invisible. You grow in layers, not leaps. You refine your mindset, sharpen your discipline, tighten your circle, elevate your standards. From the outside, it doesn't look dramatic, but internally, everything is recalibrating. And by the time they finally look up and really see you, the distance between who you were and who you've become is already massive. Realization doesn't hit them gently. It hits them all at once. One moment they're comfortable in their old assumptions, The next, they're confronted with evidence that dismantles everything they believed about you. The crazy they joked about? It produced results. The silence they misread? It built leverage. The isolation they mocked? It forged clarity. And now they're forced to process a truth they never prepared for. Shock carries a specific energy. It freezes people. It makes them replay memories differently. They start revisiting every moment they underestimated you. Every joke. Every dismissal. Every time they thought they had you figured out. What once felt like harmless mockery now feels like miscalculation. Because suddenly, you're not the unpredictable outlier. You're the composed strategist who moved without permission. And here's the part that unsettles them most. You didn't change overnight. You were always becoming this. They just weren't paying attention. They confused quiet growth with stagnation. They confused patience with passivity. They confused observation with confusion. The realization isn't just about your success. It's about their blindness. There's an internal tension that comes with being proven wrong. Pride resists it. Ego rejects it. But reality doesn't negotiate. When your actions start producing undeniable outcomes, opinions lose weight. Conversations shift. The tone changes. The laughter fades into cautious respect. And respect born from shock is different from respect given freely. It carries hesitation. Some will try to rewrite history. They'll say they always knew you had potential. They'll claim they saw it coming. Not because it's true, but because admitting they misjudged you feels uncomfortable. Others will grow distant. Not out of hatred, but out of intimidation. Growth exposes stagnation. Your elevation becomes a mirror, and not everyone likes what they see reflected back. What they don't realize is that you never built yourself for their reaction. You didn't calculate your moves for applause. You didn't endure the isolation for validation. Their realization is a side effect, not the objective. You were focused on alignment, aligning your habits with your goals, your mindset with your standards, your actions with your long-term vision. By the time they recognize your transformation, you're no longer seeking acknowledgement. You've already shifted your focus to the next level. That's the quiet irony. The moment they finally see you clearly is the moment you've outgrown needing to be seen by them at all. Their realization may arrive dramatically, but your growth was methodical. Their shock may be loud, but your discipline was silent. And in that contrast lies the real power. Not in their reaction, but in the fact that you were prepared long before they were aware.